Hi students, it's Peggy Smith. I want to take you on a little trip to the Pacific Northwest. Hang with me just a minute. Hang on, it's coming. I'm sorry, I get messed up in this. Here it comes. All right, let me get it to the slideshow and fill most of the screen. Okay, thanks for bearing with. All right, so the Pacific Northwest is going to include these states: Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, and Alaska. Now, I'm not going to test you on British Columbia, but it is part of this region, and I really want to talk about it as well as the other places. All right, so we're looking at beautiful mountains in this area. These are the two states, Oregon and Washington. And of course, here's the California-United States border right here. British Columbia being up here. This is part of British Columbia called Vancouver Island. Over on this map, this is a political map, which is showing us where the borders and boundaries of each state are. That's the whole idea of a political map. This is more of a physical map, which is showing us the physical landscapes, the mountain ranges up in this area, the lowland areas, the rivers, the inlets out to the Pacific Ocean, and so on. All right, so in this region, we want to talk about the term site. Site, as you remember, means the physical landscapes, and this area is beautiful for its physical landscapes. It's very mountainous up in this region. And most of the mountains in this region are parallel to the coast. There's the Coast Range, which sits very close to the Pacific Ocean. And remember, the Coast Range isn't very tall. It's more like hills and valleys and so on. It's beautiful to drive through. It's very lush and green and lovely. Okay, and then the taller mountains more towards the eastern portion of the states are the Cascades. And the Cascade Range is very tall. In fact, it's volcanic mountains. Okay, and so the reason it's volcanic mountain is because up in this area you have the tectonic plates that are bumping and grinding, and one of those concepts we talked about was subduction, and this is a region of subduction. Remember, the oceanic plate is traveling underneath, grinding, creating a lot of friction and heat as it goes under the continental plate, and when it does that, that magma rises up and creates volcanoes. Okay, and there are a lot of volcanoes up in this area. Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, Mount Mazama. Now, maybe you've never heard of Mount Mazama before. You might know it from a different name, Crater Lake. What that was, Mount Mazama was an old ancient volcano that erupted and then caved in on itself and created what's called a caldera. And it filled in with water and became Crater Lake. Okay, it's one of the deepest freshwater lakes in the world. In the trough area, so you've got the Coast Range over here on the west coast, closest to the Pacific Ocean, and you've got the very tall Cascade Range over here, and in between, you have what's called the trough. And the trough area is where most of the people live. Okay, it is where most of the agriculture is. It is where most of the industries are and most of the transportation links are. There's a lot of competition for this land. It's beautiful. It's rich for agriculture, but it is in competition by other things as well. So this is, again, where most of the population is. When you're in Oregon, this trough area is called the Willamette Valley. And there's lots of beautiful vineyards and orchards and all kinds of things. The trough area up in Washington is called the Puget Sound, and that's where the big cities of Seattle are and so on. Okay. All right, the weather up in the Pacific Northwest. Remember, when we talk about weather and climate, we're always looking to those 5 influences wherever we are: latitude, proximity to water, elevation, wind and topographic barriers, and water currents. And those are all going to contribute to this area. Okay, latitude-wise, they're further north than we are, so we can expect that their summers are going to be a little cooler than us. Their winters might be a little colder than us. Okay, they get more rainfall than we do. And so all those are differences based on latitude and such. And then, of course, proximity to water. They're right on the coast, and the westerly winds blow over the Pacific Ocean, bringing in that moisture, kind of easing right over the Coast Range as it's not very tall, and then slamming in to the Cascade Range. And remember, as the Cascade Range is here and the winds come in, it hits the side of the mountain and is pushed up. And remember, as air is pushed up, what does it do? It cools. If it cools and gets clouds, it's condensating, right? If it cools beyond that, you get precipitation on the western side, right? The windward side, the side the wind is hitting. Okay, so they do get a lot more rain on the western side of the Cascade than they do the eastern side of the Cascade. In fact, the eastern side of the Cascade Mountains is a rain shadow. It's very much drier. In fact, they grow totally different types of agriculture out there because it's more of dry farming, like grasses and wheats and stuff like that, or else they have to bring in irrigation. Okay, so quite different than us. Elevation is going to play into it if you're up in the mountains, the water currents running through there, cold water currents. So all of that plays a part of what creates their weather and climate up here in this area. And it's known as Marine West Coast. So it's typically not freezing cold, and if you're close to the coastline. As you go inland, you might have more of that. All right, let's talk a little bit about the sectors of the economy. Remember, there are four: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. The primary sector of the economy has to do with natural resources, okay? Farming, agriculture, lumber, fishing, any of those. That's all part of the primary sector. Any mining, anything that you drill for, any of that is part of the primary sector of the economy. Okay? Fishing is big up in this area. We'll talk about it in just a minute. Well, we'll talk about it right now, okay? One of the problems with fishing up here is that it was so good for so long that it got overfished. And this area is known for salmon, especially for salmon. And there are some beautiful rivers in this area, and which is great for fishing. However, there is a big river called the Columbia River, and it has a huge volume of water, more water volume than the Mississippi River. And it has big drops go down, like waterfalls. And so that is perfect for creating hydroelectric power. Okay? And so there's competition in this area. A lot of the farmers would like to see some of that water diverted for agriculture. Other people would like to see it creating hydroelectric power for the cities there and the urban areas. And then of course the fishermen want to keep it open and natural for fishing. So lots of competition and lots of issues they have to work out. Here is a picture of the Columbia River. Like I said, it's beautiful up here. It's right in between the state of Oregon and Washington. It's kind of the divider line between the two states. And this waterfall over here is called Mahatma Falls, and it is spectacular. It is only about 30 or 40 minutes north of Portland, and it's easy to get to. The parking's real easy. You walk right over to it. You can hike up it. You can stand right up in this area. And then right below at the base or the foot of the falls, there's this great little lodge, perfect for breakfast. So I'm just telling you, if you go up here, you need to stop and have breakfast at that place. It is so delicious. All right, another thing that's kind of interesting up here is, like I told you, the Willamette Valley is known for wine grapes. And so they grow a lot of different grapes and have a lot of vineyards in this area. But they also grow a lot of hops. And they're very well known for craft beers. In fact, Portland is like the #1 place for craft beer. And so that's kind of interesting. There's a little portion in your textbook on that I'd like you to read. The secondary sector of the economy has to do with manufacturing industry. And when we think of Seattle, you should think of Boeing. okay? Boeing moved in to this area in 1913, and they started building aircraft. They built aircraft for World War I, and then for World War II. They're still creating a lot of different aircraft and hiring lots and lots and lots of people in the area. They've just really grown Seattle to the big city that it is now. And they give tours of the plant. And if you do go to Seattle, you have to do this. It's just a great tour. You are actually in this room with these huge aircraft, okay, and seeing them. It's really spectacular. There's also different industries up here as well. There's the service industries, and that gets into more the tertiary sector. So Starbucks, Nordstrom, all their headquarters are up here, Amazon as well. Also in the tertiary sector, remember that we have healthcare and tourism, okay? Then we go to the quaternary sector, and that's higher education and government and military and research and development, those types of things. And those are all present in this region too. So it's a very, very diversified economy up in this area. Then we come to the term situation. And situation is referring to relative location, where something is in relationship to something else. And this area, if you look at the map up here, here it is in relationship to the rest of the US. And it is about 3,000 miles away from Washington, D.C., or New York City, or any of the rest of the megalopolis area. It is about 1,000 miles north of San Francisco. So it really was quite far away in distance from other places. And also, it was surrounded by mountains, right? These are the Cascades, very tall mountains, very hard to get through. Okay, so it was really a historically isolated place. In fact, in 1870, if you took the population of Oregon and the population of Washington and added them together, it would still be less than the city of San Francisco, okay, at that time. Then in 1883, the Northern Pacific Railroad was completed into Seattle. And then only a decade later, the Great Northern Railroad joined it, okay? And so then they had two big major railroads coming into the area, and that's when population really took off. Okay, so the railroads were the key to population growth up in this area. Here's a couple of pictures of some of the engines, the trains and engines as they looked back then, and what it looks like now, their Metro Rail. Tourism, but in this, remember it falls in the tertiary sector. It's big up in this area because it is remarkably beautiful. The scenery is fantastic. Rugged coastlines, redwood trees that come all the way down and touch the water. Sports fishing is big up here. River rafting is big up here. The cities are big and bustling and metropolitan, and you can do almost anything here. I mean, the cruise ships will stop in this area and load up and then take you on up to Alaska. So it's a spectacular area for being outdoors. It's got it all. It really does have it all. All right, that's the end of this slideshow. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're learning a lot about the area, and I hope you're thinking about actually going. All right, take care. I'll see you next time.